Loops can execute a block of code a number of times, a specified number of times. Loops are very handy, and if you want to run the same code over and over again, each time with a different value. JavaScript supports different kinds of loops. We have the for loops, for in loops, for off loops, while loops, the do while loops. The for loop has the following syntax. Most times you want to use the for loop because it's kind of the easiest to use. So the for loop expects three parameters, not really parameters. It accepts initialization, it expects initialization, it expects conditions, and it expects an increment. Okay, so after that, we have the curly braces, and inside the curly braces, we are going to specify the code block to be executed. Okay, the first step, which is the init, is executed first and only once. This step allows you to declare and initialize any loop control variables. You are not required to put a statement here as long as a semicolon appears. Okay, the next is the condition to be evaluated. If it is true, if the condition is true, like the if statement, if the condition is true, the body of the loop will be executed. If it is false, the body of the loop will not be executed. Okay, and the flow of control jumps to the next statement. It's just breakout. Okay, the next thing is the body of the for loop. Okay, after the body of the for loop executes, the flow of control jumps back up to the increment statement. Okay, the increment statement allows you to update the loop control variables. Okay, so this statement can be left blank as long as a semicolon appears after the condition, and then the condition is now evaluated again. If it is true, the loop executes and the process repeats itself. Let's look at an example to understand what we're just saying. All right, this is an example of a for loop. All right, let's focus on the script. So we said let x is equals to 0, so this is where the loop begins. This is the for keyword, and this is the initialization aspect. This is the condition aspect, and this is the increment. That has to stick to your memory. The first thing is the what's it called, initialization. The second is the condition, and the third is the increment. Okay, so for your initialization, you have to, it's just like declaring a variable. Okay, so we just declare the variable. It can be anything. It can be j, it can be k, it can be name, it can be age, anything. So I'm just going to use I in this example. So I said let I is equals to 0, so I'm starting from 0, and then if I is less than 5, okay, I want to check if I is less than 5. All right, if I is less than 5, okay, do this. So obviously our I is 0, so the first time this loop runs, so it will say it's going to add, you see, this is the string concatenation. It's going to, currently the text is an empty string. We've already done what strings are. This is an empty string. So this one is now going to add, the number is whatever I is, it will add it. This is also concatenation. This is a string followed by plus. Where you see plus, just know that it's concatenation, string concatenation. Where there's a string and then you see plus around it, just know that what we are doing is called string concatenation. Okay, so basically for the for loop, we are checking the initial value, okay, which is 0, and then we are checking this condition to see if it is satisfied. Okay, if it is satisfied, this will be executed. Okay, so after, first of all, the index is the initialization is what, 0. The initial value is what, 0. So And then after this is done, after it has run the first time, it will now move to this increments. Okay, plus plus means add plus one to whatever was here. So it's zero before, so it will now say plus one. Okay, zero plus one, which is one. So I will now be one. The first time you run it, okay, you say let I is equals to zero. So the first time I is what? I is zero. And if I is less than one, do this. So the first time I is zero, and obviously zero is less than one. So you say the number is zero. Then after that, it will now come and add one to it. So I will now be one. So it will now say if I is less than five, if one is less than five, output the number is one, and then it will now add another one. It will now be what? One plus one is what? Two. If two is less than five, output the number is two, and then it will now come and jump back to this increment, which will add one. Yeah, that is 2 plus 1, which is 3. Okay, and so on until when it now gets to 5. If 5 is less than 5, is 5 less than 5? No, 5 is equals to 5, so it will end, the loop will end at that point. Okay, so the last thing that will be attributed is what? The number is full. You can just copy out this code and paste it in your code executor. What am I saying? Paste it in your code editor and run it. Just play around with it. So this is a TD. This is what you're expected to see when you run that. The JavaScript while loop. Okay, you can also use the while loop. The while loop loops through a block of code as long as a specified condition is true. So this is the syntax. You have the while keyword followed by the condition and then the code to be executed. Okay, right. So like I explained before, this is the syntax. We say let I equals to 0 while I is less than 10. Obviously, I is less than 10 at first. I is less than 10. So number is 0 and then it's going to add the increments. It's similar to the for loop, and the for loop is more used. Yeah. And then there's also a do while loop. The do while loop is a variant of the for loop, just that it will execute the block once before checking if the condition is true. Do this, do whatever is here. Do it first before it will now repeat the loop while checking if the condition is true. All right, this is an example. Go through the example, study it, and I'm sure you will get it.